Ola Dahl, Christopher Doyle, and Somnath will be in conversation. And the next section is guaranteed to be an all thriller and killer. And who doesn't like a book with a lot of guessing games and the whodunit factor, which is pretty addictive. And thrills, chills, and murders will be the highlights of the session, as the next three writers will discuss the art of the thriller. I'd like to introduce Kjell Ola Dahl, who has written and published books on fiction, crime fiction, short stories, non-fiction, traveling literature, and screenplays. Well, he has it all there. He's the author of The Last Fix, The Man in the Window, and The Fourth Man. Christopher Doyle's debut book is The Mahabharata Secret. He has written articles on management and business for Indian and international publications, is a certified executive coach and passionate musician in his classical rock band, The Midlife Crisis. And Somnath teaches media theory at the University of London by day and is a fiction writer by night. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to what will be a dark, devilish, macabre, and therefore perhaps one of the most interesting sessions of the festival. We are here to talk about nothing which is nice, good, clean, high literature. We'll talk nasty stuff. My name is Somnath Batabyal. I am the author of my debut novel called The Price You Pay. Along with me is Kjell Ola Dahl, who has written several books, but we will just talk about The Fourth Man, and a fellow debut novelist, Christopher C. Doyle, with The Mahabharata Secret. We're trying to think about, before we came for the session, what and how do we bring our different interests around crime, and how do we discuss crime. So I will try and invite my fellow panelists to talk about one of the first things which we want to think through is, how do we use crime? How do we approach crime in our novels? I'll start with you, Kjell, and then perhaps you, Christopher, and then I'll come in. How would you use crime for this particular The Fourth Man, and also generally perhaps your novels?
Yes. In Norway we have a long tradition of crime fiction, and almost 200 years. So I feel I'm part of a tradition, and at the same time it's very specific Nordic in a way. So what I do is when I see a complex society and you see the individual in society, and crime and punishment is the crime creates stories, right? So my protagonist is two policemen, and they go into these more complex stories of crime, which often is murder. And my interest in that is to go to search out why things happen, why somebody is making these extreme choices, right? And in this particular book, the policeman himself is forced to do extreme choices, so he becomes a criminal in a way himself. And I like to play with those conflicts that interferes in a story like that.
Just to come in very quickly, I have to explain that a bit more. So you're trying to blur the clear lines between law and the criminal through your characters?
Yes, because I think there are always huge grey zones between what is right and what is wrong, and the law just put the border. But we are human. We are human, and we make choices, and there are always grey zones between what is right and what is wrong.
Crime in my work, and the reason why I say work is that I've got one published book. The second one is in the offing. It's work in progress. But the way I look at crime is as a very interesting device to propagate some of the things I talk about. because I'm my work is more in the genre of thrillers. There's not much time to do extensive character development, but the focus of the Mahabharata secret, for example, is on interpreting Indian mythology through science. And my book starts off with a murder. That's the first part of the crime that's involved in the book. And then, like any thriller, there is a chase between, very basically, the forces of good and evil. And the forces of good are represented by real-life, everyday people. So I haven't taken in policemen or detectives or the ordinary people like you and I. And it's about the whole story is really about how they go through challenges. They try and overcome them through the course of this search for the Mahabharata secret. So for me, crime is a very interesting way of creating plot angles, which can then substantiate the technology and the science that I'm trying to use in the interpretation of mythology.
Thanks, Christopher. And I think the way I have used this particular incident of crime, a kidnapping which takes place in the book, I later on found a much better explanation than I can ever give by the master of crime storytelling, Alfred Hitchcock. He says that you can use a bomb blast in two ways. You can have a massive blast, show a spectacle, and it's over. Or you can have that where the audience knows that the blast will happen for about 40-45 minutes, and everything around it is that the blast is about to happen, and you build up the anticipation. So while you two guys have used a murder to kind of either detection or your other way, the other things that you wanted to talk about, I used the notion that a kidnapping is about to happen in Delhi. The police know about it. The kidnapper is about to come. Few of the press people know about it, but no one knows who the kidnapper is, who the kidnapped person will be. So I try to kind of use that as a backdrop, the kidnapping itself, to tell other stories like you do. So when we say this, that if you just the last 5 minutes what we spoke about, us three, we approach crime in quite different ways. But then suddenly we are, because of marketing and sales compulsions, we are all called crime writers, and we are slotted in a particular shelf and asked to sometimes do workshops. But we write in very different manners. So let's kind of try and think through what crime writing, the crime genre, which has been around for so long, from Sherlock Holmes to the thrilling James Bond, the whole kind of crime writing. How are we pushing the boundaries of a genre which is so evolved in certain ways? Kjell, would you want to come in and talk about it?
In the Norwegian tradition of crime fiction, we have, in the 70s, there was what do you call the social realistic period in literature. It's a difficult word, but it was common to write, to use crime fiction to write about political issues, social issues, because you can ask who commits crime. Is it a poor person, is it a rich person, why? And today I see there's a development in a bad way in the Norwegian kind of crime fiction, because it tends to be more and more violent. And I don't like that. I like I think that the old traditional, like Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie, has a lot to give away to new writers. So, yes.
So the way I look at crime writing from my perspective is, crime has been around since the dawn of humanity. I think Bhutan is one place where you are very lucky. You've got a great place where there's barely no crime. But most of the world has had crime for thousands of years. If you look at the Mahabharata itself, it's filled with stories of crime. And what I did was I tried to trace the beginning of the story which revolves around the Mahabharata secret. It has its origins in the Mahabharata war, which was fought thousands of years ago. The presumption I'm making, of course, is that war was based on some historical facts, and I use science to explain why I think that way. So originating from, say, 3000 BC or whenever the Mahabharata war was actually fought, and tracing the development or what happens to that original crime, which is then discovered by Ashoka the Great, who in 244 BC. So that's the other element I bring in. And then Ashoka the Great is a force of dharma, and he decides to hide that secret away so that it cannot be misused and manipulated. And it stays hidden for 2,300 years until the current age, when it's rediscovered by the forces of evil. So I've brought in very different aspects, like the Taliban. The destruction of the Bamia Buddhas in 2001 yields one clue, which falls into the hands of the Taliban. That's a very unusual. I don't see that happening in a lot of traditional crime novels. There's a terrorist organization in India with links to Al-Qaeda, who also gets involved in this. And then, of course, you have our protagonists who are caught in this web against their own will or inadvertently, and then they try and locate the secret before the dark forces can. So I think that's from a traditional crime view. It's really stretching the boundaries, because you're bringing in mythology, I've brought in history, and also looking at an international contemporary terrorist angle, which is very relevant today.
I mean, it's interesting you said that, because one of my problems while writing this novel and being initially told that this could be a good crime novel was the absolute fear of writing a crime novel, because I've been a huge fan of crime writing and Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie. The formula which they follow, there's a particular, or a P.D. James, later on in Ian Rankin. I thought I could, with my kind of wavering mind and characters which flit from place to place, I couldn't write that kind of a traditional crime writing, though I'm hugely interested in crime. I was a crime reporter for a long time, and my book kind of comes out of that moment of being a crime reporter. And a crime reporter sees a city like no one else sees a city. He's also on the side of the law. He's on the side of the criminals. He associates with them. Plus, he's an ordinary citizen who can walk around anywhere. So this unique viewpoint, which I thought I had for a few years in Delhi, allowed me to kind of flesh out, this story about a young man who comes in from the outside and falls into this situation as he gets to be a better and better, or a more famous and famous reporter. So I think, again, from all what we three have just said, the thing which comes out is what is important to all of us, perhaps, is the situations in which the crime happens. You talk of a mythical time. You talk of present-day Oslo. I talk about present-day Delhi. So, again, let's have a conversation around how we imagine our places, or how we use sometimes fictional, sometimes real life. How do we do this? What are the elements we try to bring in to situate our stories?
In my books, I'm more close to the characters. I'm like in this, the fourth man is a femme fatale story. It's a woman. It's a very important. And the policeman is important. The close family is important. So the story grows out from the closed circle. So when I write a series, because this is a book in a series, I explore my city, Oslo, because I like to place the events in places, and I like to see if it's possible that these events could happen in those places. So this series is a travel through my city, in a way. And this is a typical noir story, which is a lot of things are happening in the evenings and nighttime, and we have extreme winters and extremely autumns in Oslo. So the climate is coloring the story, and therefore I also search for places which coherent with this kind of feelings, like harbors, subways, kind of thing.
The question then I would want to ask is, would somebody, a resident of Oslo, read your book in a very different way than, say, me, who was in just a couple of weeks in Oslo, and somebody who's never been to Oslo?
I think so, because when you live in Oslo, you will check me out. Is this correct?
Is there a fact checker?
So, yes, both yes and no. You have that element, but you have also that they like to explore the city through a book sometimes.
We can't fact check your mythical cities, can we?
Well, not the mythical cities, but the place where the murder occurs and the cultural context is a little different, because it's ironic because Rajasthan tourism is supporting this festival, and the murder happens in Rajasthan. So what I've really done is taken advantage of the fact that India at the time of independence had over 600 kingdoms, which were then molded into the republic that you see now. And two of the people in the story, one is a former Maharaja, Bhim Singh, and the person who gets murdered is a nuclear scientist from an erstwhile princely state. So he owns an ancestral fort, which is a 500-year-old fort in Rajasthan, and that's where he gets murdered. So the context of royalty, is brought in, of former erstwhile royalty is brought in, and you could probably check out the forts in Rajasthan for that. But yes, the mythical aspect, of where the ancient crimes that are committed is a little difficult to check out.
I'll bring myself in on this. Just very like you, I found that I absolutely stuck to what is real in Delhi, and perhaps this comes from being a journalist and having to adhere to facts, to a point where the story refused to flow, because I would say this cannot happen, and I'd be stalled for months, and I really, I think at times suffered for unnecessarily, because a certain thing couldn't happen at a particular time in a summer night, so then the entire sequence had to be moved to a winter night, so the nights would be longer and something could happen. So I don't know if it always helps, because you're writing fiction. Does it always help to be so such a stickler for, no, but this is the only way it could happen? Otherwise, why not write non-fiction? If we are fiction writers, why can we not create at times Oslo of your own?
There's a lot of lying in this book, and I lie a lot. But writing contemporary fiction also has to do with identification. So you have to place the story. I try to place the story somewhere close to reality. I think I look at myself as a reader. If I read something I don't believe, I don't like it. So I try to convince myself that this could happen. But it's a lot of lying. Nobody's killed.
But you and I have a special conversation about The Fourth Man and the price you paid before we bring you in, about the femme fatale. Why are we always obsessed, especially male crime writers, about the femme fatale?
She's a fascinating character. she's
Tell us about your one in this particular episode.
She's a pretty woman, and she approaches this policeman in a way, but the thing is that she's lying, and she creates a story that is not true, and when he starts to play her game, he's trapped. That's the basic femme fatale story. And what I like about it is that it's really true. People lie. People usually lie. We say we don't lie, but we do. if you ask something,
I told you there's going to be nothing nice about this session.
can you do this for me? No, I'm busy, but you don't want to do it, right? So there's an extreme character of this is that deliberately lying, trying to trap someone, and there are those people around, and that's a fascinating kind of character. So that's why we love it. And she's always, it's also connected to the obsession. This is also a book about obsessions. It's about obsessions of love and art, and when your obsession meets rejection and lies, there's tension in the characters.
I mean, let me tell you a little story when we talk about the femme fatales, which is not really connected with the book. I have a character called Madam X in the book. Now, her real name is not Madam X. It is the police, Delhi police, who term her Madam X. And she's a real-life character. She probably is dead now, was killed in Nepal about 2 years back. But she exists in police records. She's from Indore. But anyway, I called her Madam X as the police had called her in the real files. And my book is very male-oriented, and I was very scared of what the feminists would do to it. And I was very uncomfortable with the male characters at times. But in my London book launch, there was this lady who went after me. How dare you call her Madam X? It's disgusting. People later on asked me, who was that really angry woman? She was my mother-in-law. So, so I have had a lot of explaining to do about femme fatales, and I won't start here. But bringing you in on this, you were just saying that how difficult in a thriller it is to get into the head of the character. Well, we both of us have tried to kind of do a lot of character depiction in our novel. How do you get around it? That not necessarily knowing your characters yourself, or not letting the readers know your characters? What would be the other ways one can fall in love with your characters, hate them, identify with them?
It's a great question, and I won't claim or pretend that I've perfected it. I think I've still got a long way to go. The problem in a thriller is you have to keep people turning the pages. If you read to the end of one page and you say, okay, I can put the book now and come back to it later. As an author, I don't think you've really done a good job in writing a thriller. A thriller means people should really want to see what's on the next page. And that's where the character development takes a backseat, because the moment you get into emotion and sentiment, it starts pulling the story, slowing down the story, and the page turner doesn't become a page turner anymore. So that's one thing I've struggled with, and I'm still struggling with it. So what I've tried to do in the first book, and I've learned a lot, there have been a lot of, I'm grateful to readers who've come in with a lot of feedback saying, here's what you could have done, and here's what you should have done, and so on, which I've taken on board. But I think one way of doing this is through showing the way people respond and react to certain situations, to people they love. Relationships can be defined in certain moments, especially moments of crisis. And I've tried to use those situations and those those sentiments to try and, the responses, to try and define how a character thinks and try and connect with the reader. Because if a reader says, oh, if I was in this situation, here's exactly what I would respond, that connection is made. That's what I would like to think. How successful I've been is really for readers to judge. But that's the only way I think you can do it without slowing the pace of the story.
Kjell and I were walking back to the hotel sometime this morning, and I was telling him of an incident. And one of my favorite writers, and I think the best writer on crime, has been Dostoevsky. So I was just telling him the story that I had written a much thicker book than this before it went to the editors. So, and while the fight's gone between the editor and the writer, I told my editor that, do you know what Dostoevsky does with his characters, how long he goes on, what he does, all this stuff? So my editor looked at me and said, do you know that Dostoevsky had no Twitter and Facebook? So, shut up and let's get going with this story, otherwise it won't sell. How do we, and this is a question in general, in this age of instant audiovisual delights, um, try and develop characters, develop storyline, and keep them interested. Over to you. I'm not going to answer this one. You two.
How we develop characters. I think for me it's a question of long preparation. I do a lot of research, and I use living role models a lot. And like in the last book in this series, is the protagonist is a woman, and she's 30ish, and she's like, I didn't know who she was, so I had to interview a lot of women, right, around 30, 35. And this was a book that was taking place near the Christian tradition of Christmas. So I had to ask them, what kind of Christmas gifts do you buy? What do you eat when you're out? And stuff like that. And then you get a scheme, and you try to pick this, and then soon this woman gets a picture of it. For instance, that's one way.
So we've moved into research. Tell us about your research. That has been this must have taken time.
It did. I think almost a year went, sometimes while writing the book, went into the research, because there were really three aspects of research. One was the mythology. I had to read the Mahabharata to start with. It didn't make sense writing a book with the Mahabharata secret buried in the Mahabharata without reading it. And the version I chose was the translation by Krishna Mohan Ganguly, which is close to 6,000 pages. So that was one very, very lengthy book to read. The second was the historical angle, research into Ashoka the Great, because he plays a very pivotal role in the book. And again, it didn't make sense to talk about him and his philosophies without understanding that. The third was the science, and two things in the science. One was the scientific hypothesis that I have developed in the book to explain the Mahabharata secret and to explain why it could actually have been true, because it's based on actual technology and physics. It's a real technology in the world today. And the second was there are the usual weapons and explosives, and I needed to research in that. So there were three angles of research that I had to do. I did absolutely no research in character development for the reasons I've told you earlier. But I think in terms of characters, the strongest character, at least readers have told me, is actually modeled on about 10 people. Bits from each of them, though the disclaimer always is that it bears no resemblance to any living person or dead. But I picked up very interesting things. He's a former Maharaja, Bhim Singh, and he's a politician, he's aristocratic. The three Maharajas who I've met in real life were nothing like him. So I've taken some elements of their personality, their demeanor, to reflect in his personality and demeanor. But I've taken certain quirks in some of the other people I've met who are very rich and powerful people. So for example, there's a scene in the book where he's talking to an archaeologist who he's got on a mission. And the Maharaja says, hey, I've got this, we found something that proves that the myth about Ashoka the Great is not a myth, it's real. And there's a book kept on the table which is about this distance from him. And he picks up a bell, rings it, and a servant comes in, picks up the book, hands it to him. And the reason why I put this in, for example, and again, this is one of the small things which define the character. The reason why I put this in is not because I saw a Maharaja doing this. I saw the CEO of a company who was a client of mine. We had breakfast together, and he wanted his bread to be buttered, and the bread was kept 2 feet away, and he rang this bell, someone came, buttered the bread and gave it to him. I said, wow, that's something an ex-Maharaja could do. I haven't seen any of the Maharajas I've met doing that. But so no research, but little observations about people like this were, it was much more difficult to do the characters, develop the characters of the lay people, because it could be any one of us.
If I talk about my research, I had about 9 years in journalism before I left Delhi and went to London, where I was working and studying. And when I started thinking of the plot, so by about 2010, I actually had a pretty decent, sorted out plot. The characters, I knew the policemen, I knew the criminals, I knew the journalists. So everything was more or less done. And then I came to Delhi and was about to start writing it. And the biggest block I faced was the Delhi of 2003, which I left, and 1994 when I started working, had completely changed. So that meant, that entire research work, which I thought was easy and done with, had to be redone again. The Delhi's, for somebody who comes back after 15 years or so, was so disorienting that all the familiar landmarks were gone. And so I had to stay I took a place and stayed for 9 months again to get used to the Delhi language. Language also changes because of Twitter and Facebook. The young people speak a different language, which I wasn't well versed with, having not lived here for quite a while. So those kind of things took time. I'm not sure how much time we have left. We have about 10 minutes. We got 13 minutes without question and answers. So we will now talk about what is the phenomenon of the Scandinavian crime fiction. Why has it happened? How did it happen? And how many people are... it seems like your friend Mr. Horst, when I last spoke to him, that 1 out of every person in his country, 1 out of every 5 people in this country, according to the numbers, have read him. How is it? Is it because of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo became such an international bestseller and then films? Or, as you say, the 200 years of history?
I think it's a number of reasons. The one is the stories itself. I mean, you can also see movies. Gangster movies is the most popular movies.
Television serials.
Yeah, it is. So the people interest for crime fiction is there. They want to read about this. That's one thing. And the other thing is the North, fascination of the North, I think. Because Sweden and Norway are welfare countries, they're rich countries, and people say, why should there be criminality in these places? And that's the exotic thing.
So is that why the psychological aspect of your characters and novels come in? Because the situational need not necessarily need.
No, I think I used to say when I write about crime because I want to write about something else, and I want to write about my country, the politics, the social state, how things are in this country. And crime fiction is an incredible good way to write about it, because then you can go under the carpet to see what's really going on. And another factor is marketing. I mean, publishers, they run in flocks. So after Stieg Larsson, you mentioned The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I think most publishers all around the world have been looking for the new one. So, and Scandinavian crime fiction profits on that. But it's a wave, it will pass, I'm sure.
So let me bring you on this. We both are reluctant to be branded as crime novelists. We both have been speaking about it. Why are you a reluctant crime novelist? Because crime sells. Why would you not want to be? The book has crime. Why this slight hesitancy to be branded as a crime writer? I have my reasons. What are yours?
It's a great question. Yes, I'm very reluctant to be called a crime writer. The first thing is the first reason I think is that the orientation of the book is not crime. It's not important to find out who the murder. For example, the Mahabharata secret. Yes, there's a murder at the beginning of the book, but I tell you who the murderer is in that very scene. So there's no mystery about it. The mystery really is about why the nuclear scientist was murdered. What is the secret he's hiding that led to his murder? And the secret he's hiding has a connection with the Mahabharata secret, and that's where I try and draw the reader on and get the interest awakened to ask themselves the question: okay, why was he murdered? And he was murdered pretty brutally, using a very ancient mythological weapon. So all these elements of mystery come in over there, but there's no attempt to really solve the crime, because we know if the crime is solved in that scene itself. We know who's done the murder. The motive is not clear, and the motive really has nothing to do with the crime. The crime is is incidental to the entire story. It's a device. What's really important is what is the Mahabharata secret? Why are the people, these people, the murderer, why is he interested in it? And what happens after that? Because the nuclear scientist, before he dies, sends out 5 emails to his nephew, which have a series of clues in them. The nephew doesn't know it till much later, but and that's really where the plot begins. So I would think if I was a crime novelist, the crime itself the plot would revolve around the crime. It doesn't.
I mean, again, we've been talking about this. Are we reluctant because we feel that, even you said you're not a crime writer, after 4 novels, do we feel that, in a sense, the genre of crime is overdeveloped and we cannot add to it, or we have to stick to a constant formula? Or do we feel that crime writing is not necessarily high literature, and therefore we stay away and brand ourselves differently? What is this, what I'm trying to get at is that, is there no way that crime and thriller, the chase, detection, science, all of it can be enveloped in a genre which is yet to be completely defined? Can we do that?
You know, we do the same thing, all 3 of us. We create some mysteries, we keep things secrets, and we tease the reader to go to the bottom of the mystery. That's what it's about. The problem, I've been in this business now for over 20 years, and
you're still reluctant.
The reason is that the marketing is taking more and more power in this business. Because when I started to write novels, it was marketed as new Norwegian fiction. But now we are placed in this marketing box called crime fiction, and it's just out there. And if it's not meets some readers' expectations, then wow, now I think there is a banality in this marketing that I don't like.
I agree with, in the sense, the problem I, to a limited extent, faced was after the book was published. The few critical comments or reviews which came, mainly from readers, was that, damn you, this is not a crime novel, this is a slow coach, it stops at every bloody station, and people talk about eating different kinds of food, which is all true, and I accept. So it's a wrong expectation itself which is set up by, where the book is placed, and I couldn't live up to that, as you said, the page-turning business. It's a page-turner, but, if you like food, and if you like old places, and, if you like to know about femme fatale, good-looking men and women, it's not true at all. I'm lying constantly. But I have run out of questions, and you now have to take over the moderation business. Christopher, over to you.
Okay, that's a smooth transition. So I think we've still got 5 minutes. What I'd be interested in hearing from you is, how much did your backgrounds? I know you've done crime reporting, and, for example. So, how much of your backgrounds really helped you in your writing? Can you start with you?
My background is I was traveling around for many years, and then I went home and completed my studies, and I started as a teacher. And when I was teaching, I started to write crime fiction, and so I have no particular background. But I do a lot of research. Like I said, I'm interviewing police characters, I'm interviewing criminals, and I'm on the places I write about because I want it to be true in a way. So I'm just a crafter.
My background in crime reporting perhaps doesn't make me a novelist. In the sense, it will perhaps help me to write one novel, and I hope never to come back to this topic in this way ever again. But I think the background of reading as a child, and reading loads, and I think pretty much the only profession I knew the person I wanted to be was a novelist, was a writer, and so I found every way of not to be a writer, you know, to skirt around the issue. So that's why 10 years of journalism, now last 10 years of being in the academic world, to avoid kind of facing up to what you really want to be. So when it was handed to me that please write a novel, here is a contract, I really was scared. So for about 4 months I didn't do anything with it. So so in a sense, yes, the crime reporting of several years and being a journalist helped in producing a particular book. But it's my I think background of reading English literature, honors and English and all of that. Perhaps the drive to be a novelist, and also allowing me to write the second novel, which is set in a very different world, a very different time. So in that sense, the background helped, not necessarily only journalism. Journalism allows you to write well if you want to. 600 words, you have to tell a story every day. That's a great kind of exercise.
Great. I think we can throw the floor open to questions from the audience.
Just to go back to the beginning, when the crime has been part of humanity ever since the beginning of history. And you have mentioned that in Bhutan we are lucky that it sort of appear to believe that we have been spared. And here I would like to tell the audience and the rest of you that crime has also been part of our society, but it has not come out, because we were a land of country, and to traverse from one valley to the next valley, which you would take gates, like I might say, the Queen Mother mentioned that to get to get to her village, she had to, the family had to spend a night on the way. So because of that, because of the communication difficulty, it was, if somebody was two guys were murdered over here, the next valley would never come to know. So because of that, less is known about the crime and criminal activities in Bhutan. So I would just like to place on record. And of course, we are improving in that direction. Another thing I wanted to, I also dabbled in fiction, the so-called crime fiction writing, and my background is police. So
a lot of material.
But what I want to the three of you, famous authors, writers, is that when you write your crime stories, when you write them, do you try and incorporate some of the social messages that something is not going right? This has to be right. The establishment or the political parties or whoever is not paying adequate attention to address that. Do you consciously try and incorporate such ideas so that the readers get informed? Those are my questions. So
thank you. Shall I take it?
Yes.
I think any good crime novel has to be a good social critique, and that's what we were trying to talk about. That the social context in which it is placed is very important. The crime itself allows you to explore the issues you want to talk about. So as Kjell was saying, the same thing, that it pulls the carpet up from. So if I'm writing about a crime reporter and his interactions with the police, it shows you how the fourth estate and the state collaborate. Kjell, you want to talk about your book?
It's the same. I mean, when I read your book, I read about corruption, political corruption, and it was interesting. And like you said, I think it's very important in these kind of books that it's more than just blood and entertainment. It has to be a social aspect or drive in this kind of stories.
Do we have any more time, or are we? We are. Oh, but sorry, we can't take any more questions. I've just been told that we've had our time. But thanks very much for coming, and I hope you enjoyed Dark Things and Dark Thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A quick announcement. Rashna's workshop in the afternoon, Interpreting Dreams, will start exactly at 1:40 p.m.